my show, My Mother's Shoes. It's so great to be here. Wonderful to see human beings, isn't it? Are you jealous because I'm not wearing a mask? They're all masked. They're all masked. Welcome to the people at home as well. So my name is Karola and you're going to be with me for the next hour. Now, before I start, I have to have a good look at you because I want to see who I'm dealing with. Actually, it's your shoes that I'm interested in. First row, it's a gift. I've got some white cowboy boots in the first row. Now that's the first. Do you mind just lifting up your ankle? Oh, they're really groovy. Now they make a statement. Here we've got some sort of black suede moccasins. Anyone got anything fancy and unusual on? Oh, we've got some snazzy black and white kind of sneakers here. I like those. I used to have a pair of them. Are they called poi belts?
They're team. Oh, who are you talking to?
I love them.
Like Clark Sensible.
Clark Sensible. Oh, no, do you know, that speaks to me deeply. Let's have a look at what else we've got here. Funky socks, lots of funky socks. White trainers, a lot of trainers. I guess they're practical, aren't they? Now, I find that I tend to live in my docks. Now, my mother, she always said, you can tell a lot about a person from their shoes. Sometimes too much. 12th December 1958. Dear Dr. Thomas, Gosława Bielenica, aged 21, Doncaster. I understand this young Polish woman is now on your list. She was transferred to my care by Mr. Johnson. As a visitor to this country last year, she was admitted with acute suprarenal failure and profound circulatory collapse. She was resuscitated from a desperate condition using hydrocortisone and adrenaline. There was some gangrene in the toes which cleared up, and cortisone was slowly withdrawn. In March this year, she had circulatory collapse again. This time there was gangrene in both feet, and we had to ask for Mr. Smith's help. She lost the forefoot on each side. Once at home there was a muddle, as the language is a problem. Her father did not obtain her tablets and she went downhill. She's recovering once again, but for practical purposes she is now a case of Addison's disease. I take it the gangrene was the effectiveness of the cortisone. Without it, we should have a dead patient. With it, she survived, except for her forefeet. Yours sincerely. Even the happiest life, it's filled with pain. We're not in control. We like to think we are, but we're not. There are some things that I want to show you. This is my mum's alien card from when she first came to England from Poland in 1957. Her face, it's like a doll, isn't it? And there's this written in red. Registration late due to fact alien has been critically ill. There's also this makeshift candlestick. Now, I was aware of this when Mum was alive, but I came across it when I was clearing the house after she died, and there was something about seeing it in the silence of her house without her there. It's her cortisone bottle, the drug that kept her alive. Can you see the Boots logo?
Yes.
Actually, that's just a blob. It's not really a logo. Just says Boots Pharmaceutical. You know, back then, these tablets reportedly were £100 each because it was a really rare and expensive drug being taken by President JFK, no less, as he had Addison's too. So did Jane Austen own. The candlestick. Well, this is from Lourdes. Lourdes is a Catholic healing shrine in France, and Mum went there after her operation. Mary's head has melted down. Souvenir de Lourdes. So, why am I telling you all of this? Why did Mum have Addison's, and why did she come to England from Poland? Well, Addison's is named after a doctor called Addison, and it's a really rare disease, but it's serious. Left untreated, you die. The symptoms are nausea, weight loss, weakness, abdominal pain, craving for salt, abnormal fatigue, and low blood pressure. Often the cause is an autoimmune thing. The body attacks its own adrenal glands, and these sit on top of the kidneys. Actually, I've got a picture. I bet you never thought you'd be looking at kidneys at 5 o'clock on a Sunday afternoon. Kidney, adrenal. Personally, I think they look a bit like walnut whips. Walnut whip, kidney, adrenal. It means that the hormone cortisol is not produced. Cortisol does your metabolism, your fight or flight, your stress. Night. Kto puka tak późno? Milicja! Jakaś mężczyzna stoi. Otwierać! It was Stalin's secret police, the NKVD. They took the fathers first to separate the families. Then they came back for the women and children, and they were given just 15 minutes to pack. So they took precious belongings, items for gathering and bartering, warm clothing and food. And then they were herded onto cattle trains with many other families. One of the things I know Mum took on that journey was a green and brown blanket, a bit like this. I wasn't aware of this as I was growing up. I didn't always know its history. I mean, the colours on it, as you can see, they were so primitive and vivid, but I didn't always know its history. Also, it was really scratchy, and for that reason I despised it. I used to call it the dreaded blanket. One night, me and my mum, we were watching TV together. It was this 80s TV quiz show called 3-2-1. I don't know if anyone here remembers it. I've got some nods. Well, it was Ted Rogers presenting. You could either win a car or you could win a bin called a dusty bin. Now, Mum was cold and she said to me, Karola, go get me a cup of chai. Because she spoke English with a Polish Yorkshire accent. And go get me my blanket. I thought, oh no, that awful thing. Anyway, I did. I got it. And I draped it over her. She said, this blanket kept us alive in Siberia, by the way. I was like, sorry. She went, yes, it kept us alive. Your grandma wove it. Siberia, 3-2-1. Dusty bin, grandma. The way I saw this thing just changed forever. For years, I despised this item, but now it became a window onto a world that I longed to know about. It was Mum's life-saving blanket. Mum, her little brother and his sister would have huddled on that cattle train for a month, not knowing where they were going or if they were going to survive. Could you hear Jenny? Could you hear Jenny? Where are we going? Where are we going? No No seats or toilets, people just standing. It was miners, and people's tears froze on their faces. Thousands died along the way and their bodies were thrown out. Many of the tracks across Russia are really long graveyards. For food they had black bread and thin soup, and for water they scooped snow out of the hole they made in the bottom of the wagon. When they arrived, there were some farm settlements in place from previous deportations decades earlier. Apart from the wolves, there was very little livestock. So they ate weeds, vegetables they grew, animal feed they bartered for, rats and lice. Mum told me random things over the years about Cossacks galloping across the settlement on camels. How the windows on their huts was fish bladder, not glass. How they had a makeshift church and school. How they didn't have medicine, so they had to use cobwebs and mouldy bread as antiseptic. How they had to pay back Stalin for the cost of their deportations. How some people lost their faith but others never did. And how my mum's mum, my grandma, worked the frozen farmland. They longed for home, for food, for normality, but life out there was brutal, and many more thousands died, including my mum's mum and her little sister of TB. So while Mum could have got Addison's from exposure to TB, I think the fact her stress hormones shot says it all. The things Mum was quietest about in my life have been the loudest. So, where is this blanket? Well, it's a good question. When Mum died, I went away for a short break and my husband, bless him, he carried on with the house cleaning. Don't throw away the formerly despised but now much loved green and brown blanket. Anyway, he did. As it was hidden among everything else, we drove to the skip. Containers to see if I could find it. I can't believe we went to so much trouble. There was this traveller settlement next door, and this woman in a long skirt with this weathered face came out, and she was really staring at me as I was like looking everywhere. And I thought, perhaps she's got it. So I said, excuse me, have you seen a green and brown blanket? It kept my mum alive in Siberia. It's really... She went, no, love. I'd definitely give it back to you if I had that. 6 years later, in 1946, Mum came back to Poland aged just 9. At some point, she became a primary school teacher, and then one day she got called into the head teacher's office. Bolciu, ważny telegram. Wielka wiadomość, musisz przeczytać. Telegram. Tata, on żyje. On jest w Anglii. Her father was alive and in England. After 17 years of separation, the Red Cross International Tracing Service had put them back in touch. Jadek, Grandad, he had been through what I like to call an international game of snakes and ladders. 1940, first snake, big one this, being deported to Siberia. Then a ladder. In 1941, when Germany invades Russia, Stalin realises he needs his prisoners to fight for him. So thousands of Poles, including Jadek, are freed and they start to move across the Soviet Union to form Anders' army. Anders was a Polish general, then a snake. The journey out of Siberia was perhaps more treacherous than one in, with emaciated, exhausted people dying of typhus along the way. Then a ladder. Jadek joined the Polish Second Corps moving through Iran. They came across an orphan bear cub in the desert. He became their mascot called Wojtek, and Wojtek the bear learned how to smoke cigarettes, drink beer and load cannon. I promise you I'm not making this up. And after the war he wound up in Edinburgh Zoo. And then, with Poland not being safe to return to, and immigration opening, Jadek took a ladder to God's own country, Yorkshire, where, correctly assuming his wife had died, he remarried. Mum came out to see him. Do you know, she found meeting his new wife difficult, and she certainly didn't want my mother around. Miraculously, at this time, Mum fell dangerously ill and wound up in hospital. Had she fallen ill in Poland, she would have died, as cortisone wasn't available there then. The doctors put her on it. Oh, she's getting better. Let's take her off it. Oh, she's getting worse. Perhaps we should put her back on it. But there was a young doctor who'd read an article in the Lancet Medical Journal. He said, this young woman, she's got Addison's, she needs cortisone now and she needs it for good. You see, they didn't think she had Addison's because she was so young. They put her on it in time to save her life, but not her feet. Her body had started to go into shutdown, she got gangrene, and the rest you know. Nevertheless, it's a miracle that she survived. And he also said to her, you must never try and have children. Yet here I am. After Mum's special operation, she had to wear these medical shoes, and they were sort of made up for her by an orthotics expert. Whatever shoes she'd gone to hospital in, aged 20, she'd never wear again. Mum's shoes were these heavy, broad, dark brown lace-ups, and they'd been made longer than they needed to be to look more ordinary. So for that reason, there was a cork insert in each toe area. I tried to put them on once. As a child, I used to look at her and think, what on earth has happened to Mum? How do you lose half your feet? And then I'd hear her saying things like, if only they had not taken me off those tablets. And then I knew it was because of a terrible mistake. Look at J. Esther. So she's still the Polish girl. She's woken up. What she's saying? No idea. Co jest z moimi nogami? Bolesława, you're lucky to be alive. Co? You're lucky to be alive. Don't shout. She's not deaf, she just doesn't speak English. Bolesława, it's your feet, your toes. I'm so sorry. I used to feel so sorry for Mum. Often I'd see her sitting on the edge of her bed with her shoes and her socks off, and she'd be fiddling with these big big wads of cotton wool and they'd be dabbed in this brilliant purple tincture called gentian violet, which is an antiseptic dye. Oh, my legs hurt. So how come I know all of this, given Mum never spoke? And the story of her feet, it was such a no-go area. Well, it's thanks to someone else on that ward. It was a young medical secretary called Joy. And for some reason, Joy had a soft spot for paws, so Mum was definitely on her radar. And as my mother convalesced, eventually Mum went back home. The stepmother had thrown away all her clothes. But then one day, Joy came to visit. Hello? Hello, it's Joy from the hospital. I'm here to see Bola. I don't know if I'm saying the name right. I bought some biscuits. Don't know how they compare to Polish ones. Oh, what's the matter? She's practically in a coma. Her prescription, you've not been able to get it? Oh, it's not any old pharmacy. It's got to be the hospital pharmacy. It's a special drug. No wonder she's dying. She's not had a medication. Wait here. I'll go and find a phone box and I'll bring her tablets. How's it come to this again? So Mum had her life saved again, a second time. And after that, Joy became part of our family forever. When I was little, I used to call her Auntie Joy. She only died recently of dementia, but if there's one thing she never forgot, it's the story of how she met my mum. Mum could be so funny and so charming. Quite often, because of a strong accent, people would ask her where she was from and she'd get really fed up with this. She'd go, how many times do I have to tell people I am Polish? I'd go, I think you'll find it's Polish, Mum. She started telling people she was Italian instead. I'm Italian, from Rome. She thought it would shut people up, but it did anything but. They'd go, oh, you're from Italy, how lovely. Do you make your own pasta? And she'd look at me with these don't you dare tell them I'm Polish eyes. But I'd have to go, look, she's not Italian, she's Polish. So, Mum's accent made her stand out. Mum's feet made her stand out. But there was another reason Mum stood out, and it was her temper, which she'd lose quite often. Sometimes she'd lose it at home. Sometimes she'd lose it in public. Either way, it would take over and destroy everything. It was because of everything she'd been through. Siberia, losing her mother out there. Her father presumed dead. Then the operation, her toes. She was so full of pain and anger. We used to have these enormous rows. I used to call them our World War III rows. She'd say things to me like, I wish you was dead. I wish you was died when you were a baby. You are not a child, you are Satan. To call a child Satan. I'd never say the same thing back because I knew she could hit me. I'd just storm off and go, this is a madhouse, you're mental, you're crazy. And it was like this most days. One night we had the row to end all rows, and I came out with the words, and I wish you were dead. As soon as those words left my mouth, I thought, why did I say that? broke loose. I was alone in the house with my mother. And she went and got a knife out of the kitchen drawer. And she came at me with this knife. Actually, it was this knife. Only it's such a good knife, I've never been able to throw it away. I thought, she's not going to stab me, is she? I ran upstairs to my bedroom and I locked the door. And it was as if there was a ferocious bat flapping around the house. She was livid. She was crazy. And there were her shoes. Her biggest vulnerability. And what always made me love her. But when she was angry, they could play a different part. They became a gauge of her anger. She'd come thudding up the stairs. The faster the thudding, the bigger the rage. And all her woes about being weak and frail, when she was angry, she had the strength of 1,000 men. I was disabled up the stairs after me. I saw the handle going up and down on the door, and I thought, she's not going to budge the door down, is she? She didn't. But she raged insanely for the next 4 hours. And I just sat on the edge of my bed, looking at the lime green cover, thinking, I've just got to wait till Dad gets home. Just got to wait till Dad gets home. Dad worked shifts, and he was all safety to me. And she shouted and shouted until he got home. When he got back, it was as if nothing had ever happened. The next day I was a nervous wreck. I went to school. It was never mentioned ever again. Not surprisingly, I really wanted to leave home. And then when I did for university, I found it so difficult because there was nothing solid within myself. And when I saw fellow students and their families getting on, I thought, come on, you're putting it on, Brackley. When are you going to go and start arguing? But then I thought, no, some families do get on. I thought, perhaps if I take care of her well enough, she'll be happy. But she never was. Blending. Do not tell anyone what happens at home. Mum never knew me. I couldn't tell her anything bad. She couldn't cope. I couldn't tell her anything good either. I couldn't show her. Perhaps the worst thing, I realised I had a temper too. You see, I was so used to shouting, it had become second nature. And I could be cruel. When I was a student living abroad, she sent me some shoes as a gift. And I sent them back to her spoiled because I wanted to punish her for being such a bad mother. Our relationship improved dramatically over the years. It was a journey of disentangling myself from her, and it was a journey of faith. Because of my faith, love outweighed the hate, and I was able to forgive her. I used to take my mum out for lunch, and one day I was particularly nervous because there was something I wanted to get off my chest. She and I, we were getting into my dad's very 80s Citroen BX. It was like a metallic blue. Mum thought it was a limo, but it was really an old banger. And before we set off, I turned to her and I said, "I'm sorry for saying that I wished you were dead all those years ago. You will say that to me?" Yes. And we all say things now and again, don't we? We sat in the car on the road for quite a while, and everything felt so different between us. And I have forgiven Mum for everything, and I remember some really good times. The year Dad died, we took my mother to the Ritz for a champagne Boxing Day tea. Me and my sister, we'd planned it meticulously. We bought her a posh cardie. The only trouble was we didn't know whether to tell her or not. You see, Mum hated surprises because they made her feel out of control. But I thought, if I tell her, she'll say no because she was so ashamed of her feet. So on balance, we decided to keep it a surprise. The big day came. I said to Mama, why don't we have a coffee before I drive you back up north, knowing full well I'm at the Ritz. And she said, okay, I put on this old thing. And she put this jumper on with like Christmas dinner down it and mashed potato. And I looked at my sister as if to say, how can we take her to the Ritz in that? I said, Mum, why don't you put on your posh new cardie? And I could see her starting to wobble. I thought, oh, please don't lose it now. Not now. She managed to hold it together. Oh, she went, you girls, you're always making problems for me. She put it on. And she was transformed. Tatty handbag, posh cardie. We parked up at the Ritz. I had Mum in a wheelchair. She could walk, just not very far. And we made an ear on Piccadilly, just opposite the Ritz, and I went, look, Mum, look. She went, oh yes, the Ritz is gorgeous. I said, why don't we go and have a closer look? And I remember my palms sweating as I wheeled her across the road. Just then, a man in a wheelchair shot past us and went into the Ritz. The timing was like a gift out of heaven. I said, look, Mum, a man in a wheelchair has gone into the Ritz. And then a man with a top hat and these tails appeared, and before she could lose it or say a word, he went, hello, madam. And he whisked her up the ramp. The wheelchair vanished. And you know, he guided her like a lady. Posh cardie, tatty handbag, up these steps to this beautiful table with white tablecloths, silverware. And we were like children in a grotto. She was all smiles, all smiles. You'd never have thought there were decades of arguing behind us. She had champagne, sandwiches, cakes, and then towards the end, she started wrapping up these posh little mince pies and putting them in her handbag. This one for doctor, one for next door neighbour. This one for Auntie Joy. And she spoke about it for about a year. There was also a time in 2010 which was very special to me, and it was when they stopped making Mum's cortisone. They'd come out with a new version, but it just didn't agree with her. It made her so ill she wound up in hospital. I remember I was in her house in the kitchen, frantic. No, surely she's not going to die. Not in this way. Not because of the cortisone yet again. Surely not. Then this peace just fell on me like a blanket. And I heard this voice in my head and said, she's not going to die. And then I did a really British thing. I rang up the drugs company to complain. I got the number off an old box. I don't know why I rang when I did because it was after 5:30, but a chap answered and he said, try this other company. So I rang them and they answered too. And they said, oh yes, we can get the old version of the cortisone for your mum. We'll have it posted over from Oslo. All we need is your mum's GP's sign off. That night I bounded onto that ward. And seeing my mum's worry melt away, it was the best thing I've ever done. This is what Mum's shoes look like. They were bigger, of course. Way before Mum died, she said to me, Karola, when my time comes, please do not bury me in my shoes. I thought, well, I can do that. And then when her time came, I hung on to her shoes because they were so unique to her. And I thought, if I throw them away, I'm throwing her away because they were so bound up with who she was. So I put them in a bag in the bottom of my wardrobe. And then about a year later, I was looking for something. Oh, where is that thing? Did I put it in the wardrobe? Oh, what on earth is it here? They gave me such a fright. These shoes had come here, and I wasn't expecting to see them. I thought, I've got to get rid of these shoes. They're connecting me to her pain. It's not mine, and it never was. I checked with my sister to see if she wanted them, but she said no. And so I thought, I've got to throw them away. So I thought about it that week. And then I went out to the black bin. And it was such a lovely sunny day. And I was so glad there was nothing else in that bin. No debris, no rubbish. Because they were a special thing, Mum's shoes. It was like they had their own coffin. Ashes to ashes and dust to dust. Mum. Mama. I never wanted to walk in her shoes, literally or figuratively. She couldn't show me how to live. As I grew up, I used to think everything I am and everything I do has got to be the opposite of her. I used to wish she'd go to the other side of the world and leave me alone. I used to think perhaps I'm someone else's child and I've landed here by accident. But then I'd see her shoes and I'd feel sorry for her because she was smashed. Alive, but smashed. And she loved me in the only way she knew how, in a destructive way, because she was so broken. So do I walk in my mother's shoes? Well, if walking in your mother's shoes means like for like, then no, I don't. I haven't been to Siberia. I haven't lost a body part through misdiagnosis. I don't have a violent temper anymore. But I do like salt too much. I hate drafts, and I've got an obsession with gravy. Of course, it's more complicated than that. Mum never had a job in the UK. I've had lots. I've had hundreds of pairs of shoes. She just the one. Like Mum, I've married a good man. Like Mum, I've got a short neck. Don't look at it. Unlike Mum, I like cooking. But walking in her shoes shoes. I do and yet I don't. I am her flesh and blood. She was broken in one way and I in another. She was herself and I'm me. I have a legacy beyond the wounding. Mum set my feet on a path of my own, different from hers, but in a sense her shoes within me. And because of her pain, I am a funny shape. If I were a vase, I wouldn't have straight edges, I'd have many undulating curves and I hate conflict, I hate hearing children cry. I think of what people go through. Syria, Afghanistan, other wars. What will the consequences be on the generations? Mum wanted to be the way she was, but trauma has to come out somehow. A mother guides her daughter in the fundamental things, doesn't she? Affirming, encouraging, setting an example. Mum never did that. And while it was extremely difficult until the end, I would hear her praying out loud and thanking God for me, and that was nice to hear. I'll see her again in heaven, and I know she will be wearing some beautiful shoes.